In this video, we're going to talk about how to practice drawing faces. And I will also share a 20-week drawing plan, especially for learning to draw the face. So please enjoy the video. This is one of my sketchbooks from 2019, and this was the way I was practice drawing faces back then. So this is maybe familiar to some of you, which is the 100 head challenge. I also made a video about that a few years ago. You can find it on my YouTube channel. I will also plug it here and there. But basically that was a drawing challenge where you would try to draw 10 heads every day. And through this challenge, I really learned a lot. I would say it wasn't the most efficient method to learn, or technically I would say I would definitely learn to draw the face differently today. But you can see there was a lot of learning, a lot of mileage, a lot of things I could learn about shapes and whatnot, and depth and shading. So that was an interesting challenge. I personally would not practice drawing faces this way anymore. I want to give you today a more sophisticated approach to learn and practice drawing faces. As mentioned, I will also provide you with a 20-week drawing plan. So we want to talk about how to practice drawing faces today. Starting off with week number 1, which is basically building a foundation. I want to say that the general outline for every practice, because I found it most efficient for myself, is 3 hours a day. That could be vary a bit for you. It could be more or could be less. Everything that I'm going to suggest is just optional. It's always open for you to adjust to your own personal needs, I want to add. First week of drawing basic forms. Suggest for every beginner is learning super basic things. I know some people may be tired of this, but I cannot emphasize this enough. Drawing boxes and cylinders is the absolute key for it. The things that we need, so we're going to need a concept of a box, and we need the concept of a cylinder, right? So we want to combine these two. How do we do that? And I would suggest maybe starting with the box. I want you to imagine that around this face, around this head, there's something like an invisible box, which is the outside constraint for the general mass of the face or the head. That could look like this. And now we also need the cylinder for the neck, of course. So like this. Why do we need that? Because we need to get an understanding how plane changes work in the face and how the general mass and proportion work. So if I would divide this, because that's what we can do with planes, we can divide them. So if you ever have used a 3D program, you can use something that's called subdivision, where you can subdivide these planes, and we can technically subdivide them again and again and again and again, very small. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is we want to get a general feeling for the proportions. We can also try to draw this box more from below, make it a bit harder on ourselves, but we always want to try to envision a head. And again, we are just subdividing it to make it easier to understand. Why is this subdivision so important? Because when we're going to place the face and the features in a later stage, we need to exactly know where we have certain separation, because we can separate these features. So your first week would technically look like filling a full page just with boxes and cylinders. Also a great warm-up. Can always recommend that. You can loosen up. If you feel like that's still hard for you, also the cylinder is sometimes off or the ellipse is off, you can also draw through if you want. So, for example, like this, like we could look inside of the box, right? So to make it super straight, that would be like we could look through the box, right? So this would be the first basic approach. And you can just fill a page like this. Now here's another example. we can basically just fill a page like we want to. Week number 1 consists basically out of spending time drawing practice geometric shapes, understand the structure of the head, and study the basic proportions of this shape. After that, we going over to week number 3 to 4, which is 3-dimensional forms. What we want to do, we eventually want to get a little bit more further with this, right? So we kind of like want to evolve from the base, that's the absolute basic geometry, basic geo. Now we want to evolve, right? Because we cannot draw this. No one's going to see that that's a face. You're absolutely right. So what's the next step? Just draw a box again. Now we have a few options. We could try to either cut into this box, add to this box, or make a more complex geometric form. And we try to go for more of a complex geometric form. Now we can also start to think about maybe adding an ear, but just adding the form of the ear. Then where would the neck connect to the head? We just draw over this again. Now here we try to draw something a bit more complex, so more geometrical. But what we want to do and what we eventually want to achieve is to place these elements, the eyes, the nose, the mouth and the ears, in a proper way inside the mass, right? Not inside the box, because that will kind of like always be limiting. But what we want to do, we want to fit these features there. Talking about facial anatomy, and that's the subject for the next weeks, which is basically week 5 to 8 is anatomy and proportions. So what we want to do, we want to study the underlying base geometric forms of the features we need in order to be more specific with it. We can basically draw the geometric basic shape of an ear and then try to draw a real ear inside of that. Same goes for the eyes and same goes also for the nose, right? So we have to understand this. Another practice option would be for you to just fill a page with these basic geometric forms. And that's super, super simple, right? You can choose whatever you want, whatever it is that you want to prefer. So when you say, I want to practice maybe to draw a nose, and you start just with the basic geometric forms. Or you say, I want to practice the basic shape of an ear, but not to forget that everything that we draw has planes, right? So everything has side planes, top planes, and maybe bottom planes, depending on what is the perspective we have. So same goes for the eye. Obviously that's a bit easier. So the pupil's right in the middle, right? But this is a way where you can basically just say, okay, I'm just going to fill one page only with these. And when you've done that, the next step could be, okay, now let's try to draw these things inside. Very common mistake I see that, for example, people completely forget about this upper plane of the ear. You see that everywhere. People just do these very flat ears, but they completely forget about the top plane or the bottom plane, depending on where they're at. Same for if you learn to draw noses like someone who likes anime. What they often do is in manga, they do these simplifications, right? These super indications. This is great. This is super artistic. But in order to learn, it's hard because what you first have to learn is the plane change, because this means always three-dimensionality, right? 1, 2, 3, 3D effect. That's what we always want. We never want only one plane. We don't want this, right? We want this. So fill a page with these boxes or with these more complex geometric forms for the features and try to draw that in, depending on what it is that you try to draw, right? And challenge yourself. If you feel, okay, I got this is easy now, do more, do different views. So the next step then is basically combining that, which means what we want to do, and that's what we already did here, is we want to add these features to the more complex geometry. Now, when we've done that, we have now more options. We can start to say, well, let's try to draw a face above this, or let's take another step into a proper direction, which would be to not only study facial features, but also bone structure. And I made a Draw With Me video to the topic of drawing bones and drawing the skull. I will also put it in here. But the next few weeks, which could be 1 or 2 weeks, would be just by drawing skulls and just trying to understand these basic structures. And I also want to show you how that could look. You can also go for a more classical approach by just drawing them. But what I also sometimes like is having more fun with these things, right? So at some point I start to just rotate skulls from my imagination, just as a warm-up. But this is how I try to approach it in a more fun way, where you don't be like, okay, I have to draw a full page of skulls. That's something you can do once or twice. If you enjoy it, please do more of it. But if you feel like, okay, I don't like the typical academical approach or something more free, you can do fun stuff. You can draw a full page which tells a story of imagination. So I think I also shared this in another video already, but this is also just a bit further, which means now I draw the full bone structure and I imagine scenes in my head and I just do that as my practice. That's basically part of my practice routine. By the way, if you want to support any future videos, because I always forget this, please feel free to subscribe and like the video. And if you have also any content suggestions or questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. Now, what could be the next step? So let's say you have now the capability and possibility to draw a skull in every angle. Why do we need that? Because what we want to do, we want to understand these landmarks, this and this. These things are called landmarks. What they basically mean, they indicate bumps in the face. So when we see a face from the side and we see, okay, there's a certain bump coming out on the side, what is it made of? Because it will help us to communicate a better realistic face. So now we got the basic understanding of basic geo, we mastered the complex geo plus the features. Now what we want to do, we want to draw the face over the geometric form. Finally, right? Because that's what you're here for. What we can do is we can go back to make a combination of the basic geo and start to draw features over it. What you maybe will realize when you start with this approach is that either way you draw the features too big or too small, and there are very small nuances in adding these features. Why? Because it's extremely important how big and small they are. Every person you meet, every face you see has different proportions. But also, depending where is your cultural background, where is someone coming from, these features going to vary extreme. And this is why drawing a lot of different faces is always a good practice. And at some point we think about indication, which means we don't want to draw the full form. We also want to kind of like find a efficient artistic approach to draw these faces. Because what most of us want to do is find their own style. right? But the style contains out of the knowledge we have and also the artistic decisions we make. So some things are bound to efficiency, some things are bound to the preference in what shapes do we like, what ratios do we prefer, do we draw a female, do we draw a male. These are all things that influence our drawings. But what we want to do eventually is we want to be able to do this, to draw faces without really thinking. Now we also have to talk about this, which is hair. Something I see very often my mentorship students are doing is something which I call lazy hair. And by lazy hair, I mean they basically just draw a really nice geometric head and they then just do a very quick scribble on top. The thing is, hair is also form, right? Hair is not flat. It is a three-dimensional form. Super long, slim tube. The mass of the hair consists out of a lot of these super small tubes, right? So a bunch of them together makes a big strand of hair. I really get annoyed by seeing this because hair is super easy. It's much easier than this because it's basically a bunch of tubes. All we need to do is we have to apply gravitation and we have to apply volume. Volume just comes by adding these little tubes together, right? So that makes the volume. And gravitation means it gets pulled down. And if it's above a geometric form, it wraps around that form. Whenever you draw hair, I want you to keep in mind to not draw lazy hair. And whenever you see someone making a YouTube video and drawing hair like this, I want you to comment lazy hair below and tag them with this video. A practice week, how could it look? Basically trying to draw these geometric faces and then also try to add different hairstyles on top. So something like this. Right? So you can start simple, you can warm up with a geometric form. Sometimes you can also test different mediums. Here I tested the brush pen. It was super shaky, so I just went in and went over the geometric forms again. Also draw the head a bit from below. Also sometimes see, okay, this is too small, this is too big. But that's how you can approach this practice. So what you would do, you basically fill a full page with these type of faces. And then you can also start to have more fun by drawing different hairstyles, right? And trying to think of how can I make this more exciting? How can I make this head more interesting? How can I give her more shapes? How can I make him more interesting? Maybe he has a bit more beard. Maybe he has strong eyebrows. Maybe he has a stronger beard shape here in the front, right? So this is how a full page of applying this could look. So an absolute option here is also to, for example, give yourself a week of just drawing basic hairstyles, right? So studying different hairstyles, practicing drawing them, and focusing on the flow and movement of the hair. And last but not least is then, of course, the full face integration, right? Or something that we already talked about. For me right now, it is, for example, learning not only brush pen or a different medium, but also learning different indications. Because when you're able to figure out the general mass of the head and the general forms, and you figure out, okay, I know this now. I know how to draw all these features. You can start to experiment with it. And sometimes what I would do, I would kind of like draw the same thing over and over and over and over again. This is also optional for you if you are into animation, manga, or anything that kind of like goes in that direction. That could be also a week for you by just doing these pages every day, where you watch your favorite animation movie or you watch your favorite animation series. And what do? You look for indication, form, proportion, how these artists would use their mark making to communicate certain emotions. So I just wanted to show you this because I know a lot of you are also interested in this type of direction. I also personally do that. I have a lot of animation movies I love, and when I feel like, okay, there's something that sticks with me, I take a sheet of paper and I do these practice pages where I just try to understand what is it that I like. Is it a proportion? Is it a shape? Is it a mouth? Right? This is basically a warm-up, not focus anymore on just the face, but also focus on full body. But also I want to tell stories because it's not only drawing only the face is not that exciting anymore. I want to challenge myself, and this is something I would always advise to anyone. It's always how you react to your surroundings, how you react to your own personal growth. And in order to make sure that you grow more, you have to challenge yourself. So I just do this as a warm-up. I think about things, what I've seen, what do I like, and I just let this come out. And this is just by imagination, it's just a random drawing. We start with basic geo, we go to more complex geo. We want to learn bone structure. When we have the bone structure and the geo done, we want to apply features on that. We want to not do lazy hair. We want to master the features, and then what we want to do, we want to be free, so we can practice whatever we want. If it's animation, if it's drawing random faces, if it's practicing a medium over and over, if we want to draw stories, that's all up to us. So if this video was helpful for you, please make sure to like and subscribe. I also have some mentorship slots open. There's a link below the video. These are all suggestions. It doesn't mean that it has to 100% work for you. Everything is adaptable and optional. Give me feedback in the comments. Otherwise, I wish you an awesome day. A lot of fun with this practicing, and please make sure to share your results with the world, because everything that you produce will also motivate someone else to pursue drawing.